Well, okay. Anyway, so speaking of racism today, we are talking about our favorite apartheid state, Israel.
Mm-hmm.
The Bill Cosby of countries. They really
They're
can't
not
do
guilty.
anything right, and yeah, they're not guilty. They can't catch a
Wow.
break. The only thing that Israel is like good at right now is like throwing up like faceless luxury condos or being aggressive at bars or exporting nubile co-eds to hawk massages and scented candles at American mall kiosks.
Have you been to the Dead Sea at the mall? Where are they coming from? It's disgusting.
They're actually like
anyway.
being unearthed from the Dead Sea. So yeah, there was like a recent kerfuffle. The Guardian reported that 58 protesters were dead and 1,200 were injured. Fire, and they were all protesting the move of the U.S. embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem.
Correct.
Adam is a twink.
I would say that
The twink
it
embassy.
wasn't a direct correlation. The protests had been going on for a while.
Okay.
The split screen optics of like Jared and Ivanka like dancing at the embassy opening and then like kids getting shot before
Business
them.
as usual.
Yeah. So what? So you're going to take the pro-Israel side. I'm going to take the anti-Zionist.
I do want to come out on record and say that I am a Zionist.
Anna, no.
I am a sexual Zionist. Only Jewish
Baba Booey.
is allowed in this occupied territory.
Oh.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, that's interesting you say that because a lot of the Israel propaganda machine, from my experience growing up in Zionist youth groups, is like sort of selling sex tourism and
Right.
selling like
They
a
wanna,
politics
like, mate
connected to
you.
like your burgeoning sexuality. Like I was at summer camp, like having my first experiences with girls, and they were also shoving this like pretty heavy like Zionist politics down our throats at the same time.
I mean, I think that's brilliant psychological warfare because
It's
there's
great.
nothing like crossing your like sexual and political wires.
Right.
Yeah.
I used to go to Zionist summer camp in upstate New York, even though I grew up in Vegas.
I'm so jealous.
And
Me too,
yeah,
honestly.
and then I don't think I was getting too much action in public high school, but at camp I was kind of a little bit of a pimp, and so then I got really into the politics because I kind of associated it with getting hand jobs and stuff on the sports field after Shabbat. But yeah, no, I lived in Israel for a while between high school and college. And I sort of lost my Zionism there that year. I moved there right after Ariel Sharon, who's also known as the butcher of Sabra and Shatila,
Right.
disengaged from Gaza, which was like a big deal because there was like a few settlements that were liquidated. Pretty much since then to today, what you're seeing in Gaza is Gaza has been kind of like the world's largest open air prison. There's a naval blockade in the Mediterranean. The Israeli military controls everything that goes in and out. Their buildings have been destroyed in various conflicts with Israel, and they refuse to send in building materials because they say they can build bombs with them. Fast forwarding to this week, like there was a tweet from the IDF that said these are like the weapons that the Gazans are sending over to Israel, and one of them was kites that were on fire.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which was just insane to me.
I mean, I think the general kind of PR strategy there seems to be to corner these people to a point where they retaliate, like to completely fight or flight response as animals. And then people are like, well, they're a bunch of animals. But if anybody in that position would probably act that way if they're like families and livelihoods
Israel,
were
much
threatened.
like American liberal feminists, are aggressors masquerading as victims. No.
Oh yeah, I mean, there's 100% a victim complex. There's this argument that they have to recognize the state of Israel in order for peace to occur for the Palestinians. Like Gaza is such a small strip of land, and it's one of the most densely populated areas in the entire world. And, you know, they're expecting them to say, oh, we recognize Israel's right to exist.
I know, but this is a difficult question. It's a moral gray area, and it's one that, like, I sympathize with kind of the basic Jewish perspective. You kind of have a new perspective of life when generations of your family have been annihilated, exterminated.
Well, that seems like sort of the divide between younger and older Jews.
Yeah, there's a
with younger
generational-
Jews being progressively less and less like Zionist because they are further and further away from the Holocaust. As someone who's looking to convert to Judaism, I met with
I don't know why.
okay, fine, I won't.
That's
And this
fine.
honestly makes me want to not convert to Judaism because
That makes sense to me.
and when I met with like a former rabbinical student who was sort of like giving me some insights into my conversion. And he was like, there's this thing called Honeymoon Israel. It's for like interfaith couples or like young Jewish couples to get basically another like birthright-esque like free trip to Israel.
I'm so jealous that I
I'm
didn't
not
do
gonna
birthday.
do. I don't want to go to Israel.
I really don't.
And as someone who's converting to Judaism for like cultural, spiritual reasons, I don't have any connection to Israel.
Well, I mean, I think it's like historically their homeland, right?
Biblically,
biblically,
the fake ass
not,
Bible.
Well, no, this is like where Abrahamic religion was born: Judaism, then Christianity, then Islam, in this like tiny little sliver of land. And the sad thing is that actually everybody has a claim to it.
I mean, that's like the fundamental issue is that the Palestinians have a legitimate right of return, but their lands have been developed over their cities. Fair
Yeah,
way.
how do you accommodate everyone? It's a really sad and unclear situation.
Well,
but
I think the answer is reparations, personally.
Well,
I mean,
what does that look like?
I would consider myself at this point an anti-Zionist. I don't think that like a continued apartheid, which only benefits your demographic control, or are you gonna think beyond like this concept of having a Jewish state and saying like, oh, maybe having a state tied to like one ethnic identity and having a democracy, those two concepts don't really jive.
Well, you know, I think that in the long run, this is almost like a moot point because like the kind of the neoliberal processes will make sure that there's no such thing as like nation statism down the line anyway. Everything will be like globalized. And
Sure.
like, maybe it's a good thing that Elon Musk or Mark Zuckerberg will put their boot on all of our necks because it will settle the Israel Palestine issue once and for all. There's a lot of like surprising things about this latest episode. This latest like Israeli scandal. For one, on a lighter note, I was genuinely shocked to see how busted Benjamin Netanyahu's wife was.
Yeah, she's whack.
It's funny because Brad texted me about this. Brad is Meg's
this
boyfriend, for those who don't know.
The fuck is he texting you for?
I was engorged, ... with rage. He was like, Bibi really brought his dog to the ceremony. And I was like, what is he talking about? I want to see the puppy.
Ew.
And then I realized that
Yeah,
he was
she's
talking
whack.
about his wife. And I was like completely shocked because this is a country where every piece of trim walking the street is like a clone of Gal Gadot or Natalie Portman. And he like picked the one that looks like a fruit
looks
bat from a Disney franchise.
Horrible.
This woman is hideous.
He used to look good back in the day.
Netanyahu is my absolute male ideal. He's so sexy. And every
Yeah.
time
I
see
used
him,
to dream of doing some sexual tourism in Israel, but not anymore.
I mean, I will still do it. I like every time I see like that picture of young Netanyahu
Yeah.
in the military fatigues, like my like pussy region starts to feel like the Gaza Strip. It's all these like conflicting violent energies.
Anna.
But
He's a fascist, but he was such a piece of ass in his day.
yeah, he was. And he
I'd
sort
rather
of
fuck a fascist than a neolib.
he sort of
Yeah.
coasted off of his brother. His brother was like a war hero.
Right.
He was the
yeah.
hero of the raid on Entebbe, and then he died. His son is kind of like proving to be a political liability. Like he actually like disclosed details of government corruption while he was drunk at a strip club in Tel Aviv with his friends. Like people like overheard him being like, "Oh, can you get
Wow,
away with
Adam,
it?"
I thought your
Yeah, yeah.
blowjob story was the most humiliating Israeli
No,
strip club
no.
story to come out of that.
Yeah. Yeah, and then he's also like sort of a Pepe. He like shares anti-George Soros memes on his Facebook page. Protocols the Elders of Zion adjacent like Pepe kind of memes.
Well, the biggest revenge for being like a shitty tyrant is that your kids turn out to be like total retards. But I've noticed that like on the New York Times, on the Washington Post, the coverage of kind of Israel's murder of Palestinians has it's taken a line from being like openly kind of pro-Israel to being tentatively anti-Israel. And I say like anti-Israel and not pro-Palestinian, like deliberately. Lately, I think that like what you see is like this new emphasis on like Netanyahu and the IDF as being like criminal enforcers of the Middle East region as a function of the idea that Trump is like the uber villain in our times, like going political mythology.
Yeah.
This to me seems also kind of disingenuous because there's no real political or human sympathy for the Palestinians. It's just, the liberal media wants to score points against our Führer, so they
Right.
will use the Israel angle.
But yeah, I mean, I'll tell you from coming like from a Zionist youth thing, what we were just fed when we were kids was the New York Times is incredibly anti-Israel. The media is incredibly anti-Israel. Don't even get us started on the BBC and like the media in Europe because they're so anti-Semitic and anti-Israel. The issue is that there's a firm stake in the ground that if you are anti-Israel, you are anti-Semitic. So if I make a statement that I'm anti-Israel, then I'm technically a self-hating Jew.
Yeah.
And
Which you are.
well, of course,
But
I
not
am.
for that reason.
But not
for
for
a
that
myriad
reason.
of other reasons, yeah.
Yeah, not for Israel, but like Dasha said, it is like a generational thing. While the American Jewish community is typically a liberal community that votes between 75 and 80% for Democratic presidential candidates,
Yeah.
there's always been this blind eye that comes to Israel.
Yeah.
And I think it has to do with proximity to the Holocaust. The fear aspect of the propaganda around the formation of the state of Israel doesn't make as much sense.
I mean,
to
it
us.
turns out that they can't really be safe because they,
Well, they
But
can't
it's
be safe
actually a
from those
very
kites.
contentious-
yeah.
From those burning kites.
I mean, the sad thing is that actually nobody really cares about the Palestinians.
No.
Nobody does.
They are the forgotten people.
The other, fun fact is that for everybody piling onto Israel, but people are not as instantly triggered or outraged by Saudi Arabia. And to me, this is madness. I mean, or Yemen,
Yeah.
but this to me is madness because the Israelis, at the very least, are oppressing a people that they perceive to be their enemy. The Saudis are like oppressing their own kind. They put women in cages. I mean, like, come on.
And then with the support of the United States, like
Yeah.
creating the world's largest humanitarian crisis in Yemen that no one really cares about at all.
And it's like every couple of months there's like an article from some well-placed PR strategist or like a weapons manufacturing consultant who's like, Palestine is on its 2,000-year reform plan to become like a modern democracy. And it's like,
Yeah, there is also sort of a soft alliance that's come about in the last couple of years between Saudi Arabia and Israel, which is like kind of
I'm
interesting.
sure.
Yeah.
I'm sure they have to like kind of, they're like two dogs at a dog park, like circle each other's asses and agree to not maul each other to death.
There are enough people like dipshits in America that go on Birthright that have like a hot Israeli soldier on their bus and then decide that they're going to defend Israel for the rest of their lives here.
Well, one of the first things that the rabbinical student I met with asked me was, "Are you ready to die for the Jewish people?"
I am.
Which gave me, I mean, that gave me some serious pause.
Well, you're ready to die, but not necessarily for the Jewish people.
Yeah, just in general.
I'm like Jewish on my mom's side, like at least marginally, and I'm Armenian on my dad's side. This is a very heavy burden to carry. It sounds narcissistic, but when you have like two bloodlines that were both threatened with extermination, with
Genocided.
liquidation, you start to take ethnic affinity, you start to take it very seriously.
Sure.
And it's not to say that I'm like Israel's number one fan, but like I sympathize with, as much as I sympathize with the Palestinians, and I really truly do, I also sympathize with the Israelis.
It's difficult for me too because
I don't
the
sympathize with them.
optics are
They're
so
rude.
bad. Like,
Real Israelis, like actual Israelis, are rude
Ugh,
and insufferable.
disgusting.
They're all like a Sacha Baron Cohen character, and they're all so hot, but they're so rude that it kind of negates
So
their
hot.
hotness. I will say their gay porn stars are top notch.
incredible.
However, I mean, I sympathize, I guess, with all these people that fled the Soviet Union and now live in Israel. But yeah, another fun fact, though, that is boundlessly entertaining for me is that Israel actually does not recognize the Armenian genocide, which Hitler very
Right.
openly
That's
modeled the
insane.
Holocaust on the genocide. He was like, how can we exterminate as many people as possible in a mechanical and efficient way? And like, of course, this is preposterous because Jerusalem also has a very large Armenian population. It has a
There's
historic
an Armenian
Armenian
quarter,
quarter.
yeah.
And it's wild that Israel does not recognize the Armenian genocide because they have a little bit of the finger up the butt, the anal foreplay with like Turkey and Azerbaijan, and they
Right.
have to like keep up appearances.
I mean, even like more relevant to today, there are a bunch of African refugees who've spilled over the border from Egypt, and Israel's like basically turning them away. I mean, the refugees from Eritrea and Darfur and stuff who are seeking asylum in Israel, like a country that's supposed to be founded in the wake of like a genocide.
Yeah.
These people being systematically imprisoned and then kicked out.
Wait, are these like Jewish refugees?
No, just
Okay.
people from Africa that have like escaped through Egypt to seek like political asylum. There has been like certain mayors have said we want to create asylum cities or whatever, but it's been similar to the United States where they're like, oh, we don't want these people in our country. We want to get them out of here.
It's a horrible thing to do to people who are fleeing. But on the other hand, there's this idea that like nation states or ethnic affinities are bad in this day and age. And that may very well be the case. And perhaps we can never return to the old way of the world, like just as we can't return to like the old gender roles or whatever. But there's clearly like a tension. I think that people are naturally, inevitably tribal. And it makes sense.
Right.
I mean,
I agree.
It makes logical sense why, certain countries wouldn't want an influx of other people from another country.
Yeah, I don't know. It just seems pretty hypocritical to me. I mean, obviously the Palestinian issue is the biggest hypocrisy.
Yeah.
But for a country to be founded like in the shadow of the Holocaust and then to completely ignore, similar suffering.
Well, Jews are so cliquey.
Well, it's it's like a bizarre, irrational reality. But the fact of the matter is that like tribal affinities are completely bizarre and irrational. And like, how do you there's two options. You either return to like that old tribal mode of being, or like you truly try to develop a society
a
where
real melting pot.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, that's just sort of the answer you have to get to at a certain point is like, does it work for you to say, I'm going to have a Jewish state and for it to also be a democracy? What would make the most sense to me is saying like, okay, we all live here. This shit sucks. Like, you guys got kicked out of your home 60 years ago. Maybe like Belgium has very different spheres of influence, like between French and Flemish, like people. I mean, that sounds to me like probably the best idea, but I mean, then you'd be giving up on the whole concept of Zionism in a Jewish state.
And it's a terrifying proposal, I think, for like Israeli people because then you have to contend with a totally different set of values. And as the great Zionist Marty Peretz said, and I think like he's been wrong about so many things, but one thing that he said that really always struck me as correct was that he said, my children's generation cares about diversity, but they don't believe in actual difference between people. And there's a lot of real, actual, serious difference between people.
Sure.
Yeah, so did we solve it?
I think we nailed it.
The Israel thing? I really, at this point, just don't care anymore.
I know.
Like, it's embarrassing at this point. It's just like your parents get like too emotional about it. You have to get in arguments with them at Passover and shit. Where they're like, they're basically saying like Nazi type shit to you about Palestinians, and then you have to be like, you're on the wrong side of history, and then everyone's crying. It's like, at a certain point, I kind of just want to be like, you know what, that's a different country.
Yeah,
I don't pay taxes there. I'm an American.
You're
My
not
country. I have enough
Israeli.
issues in this country. Whatever. Jews are all histrionic and emotional.
Yeah, we're all neurotics and hypochondriacs.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I think you could make the argument. You could say that a country that was truly secure and powerful wouldn't feel the need to heavy-handedly oppress other people.
And to get so like upset every time someone's like Natalie Portman like snubs them.
Mm-hmm.
They
Yeah.
really have no.
Well,
I'd be
for
upset
that.
if Natalie Portman snubbed me.
Sure.
Hasn't Natalie Portman heard about the incredible gay nightlife scene in Tel Aviv? And they have the most vegetarian restaurants per capita in the entire world.
Ooh.
That,
When you put it
ladies and
that-
I don't know if
gentlemen,
you could
is
be
why I'm
against-
going to Israel.
Oh, you like text messaging? Did you know that was developed in Israel? So if you're gonna BDS, you better stop
Do you
texting.
like pomegranate?
Yeah. Do you like drip
That's actually
irrigation?
an Armenian.
Oh, they try to say you can't use computers because like the Pentium was like developed in Israel. So if
Fuck
you're really
you,
if you're
Israel.
against Israel, I guess you can't use computers. Someone on Twitter like a couple of years ago found this Facebook page called Israel's Dank Meme Stash, and it's like all of these like lame ass like fucking Hillel girls at like different colleges using like AAVE and like that black woman gif on the Wendy Williams show where she's clapping. They basically like do it to like defend Israel's brutality. It's like that feel when you're criticizing Israel, but
You're using a computer
Yeah.
to record your podcast.
it's a real nightmare
Sound
of
familiar?
the internet. Check that out sometime. It's really fucking terrifying.
The faster someone Venmos money to
Yeah.
get Anna on a jet to Israel out of here,
Yeah.
the better off.